Shabbat
Shalom.
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 Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
That was a great chorus of Shabbat Shaloms. It's nice to be back after taking a little time off. I want to thank the Keruv Committee and its leadership for their organizing such a meaningful Shabbat last weekend. And we're looking forward to the Pride Car Parade tomorrow afternoon, beginning in our synagogue's parking lot at 1:45. Please join in the fun and support all those in the LGBTQ plus community. Mazel tov to Nia and her family on this special Shabbat, and I want to thank her for insights into the more challenging aspects of the punishment of Korah and his followers. I'd actually like to pivot now to another aspect of this narrative. And to begin, I'll share a story that I read in Thich Nhat Hanh's beautiful and pithy book, True Love, about a couple in Vietnam. A young man went off to war, leaving his pregnant wife behind. 2 years later, he was able to return home, and the young woman went with their young son to meet her husband. They cried out in joy. The young mother went out to buy supplies for a ritual of reunion, while the young father attempted to convince his son to call him daddy. The little boy refused, saying, "Mister, you are not my daddy. My daddy is someone else. He visits us every night, and mommy talks to him every night. And very often she cries with him. And every time my mommy sits down, he sits down too. And every time my mommy lies down, he lies down too." The father is hurt, deeply humiliated. And that is why when his wife came home, he would no longer look at her or speak a word to her. He then humiliates her by not allowing her to perform the rituals of reunion. He turns to alcohol, leaving his wife every night without speaking with her. Her suffering was so great that in the end she threw herself in the river and drowned. When the young father heard this news, he returned to the house, and that night he was the one who went out to get the lamp and lit it. Suddenly the child cried out, "Mister, mister, it's my daddy. He's come back." And he pointed to the shadow of his father on the wall. "You know, mister, my father comes every night. Mommy talks to him, and sometimes she cries. And every time she sits down, my daddy sits down too." In reality, this woman had been alone in the house too much. And every night she talked to her shadow. "My dear one, you are so far away from me. How can I raise my child all by myself? You must come back soon." She would cry. And of course, every time she sat down, the shadow would sit down. Now the husband's false perception was no longer there, but it was too late. His wife was already dead. Underneath this tragic story is the question of why the young father did not want to talk about this with his wife. When we do not ask clarifying questions and when we do not listen deeply to them, suffering endures and ensues. We find a similar situation in our Torah reading this morning. Korah and his followers rose up complaining about Moshe's leadership. And then Moshe falls on his face and defensively tells them that they will get their due for their words of rebellion. Today, I want to imagine a different scenario when Korah approaches Moshe with different words. Imagine these. "Moshe, we all appreciate all that you have done for our people. And now we're hoping you can involve us in the leadership of our people. Perhaps we could talk about how we can help." How might Moshe have responded in this case? Or even if Korah said what he did, but Moshe reacted differently. The text says, "Vayishma Moshe Vayipol al panav. When Moshe heard, he fell on his face. But did Moshe really hear their complaint? Did he really hear their suffering? Did he try to understand where they were coming from? Did he try to give them the benefit of the doubt? Too often we listen, but do not hear. We talk past each other, but we really do not engage. Sometimes our minds are elsewhere, thinking about something else. Sometimes we're not listening at all. I cannot tell you how many times I've spoken with someone and they are looking at their phones. And this is not just during Zoom meetings, even in person. To listen deeply, we must actually look into the other person's eyes, deeply connecting and taking in what they are saying. We must say that I am here for you. As the Torah states, Hineni, I am present. A word we find in this haftarah as well. Even when someone's criticizing you, as Moshe was experiencing with Korah, we must try not to become defensive. This is not easy. The parts of ourselves that protect us get activated and then can react strongly and defensively. But instead, we should try to understand where someone's coming from, giving them the benefit of the doubt, seeing them l'chav zchut, giving them really the best opportunity, as our rabbis teach in Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs emphasized this aspect of our tradition. He points to the difference between the two foundational cultures of the Western world, ancient Greece and Judaism. The Greeks, he argues, were primarily a visual culture, creating masterpieces of art, sculpture, and architecture that you could see. And it had its spectacles, plays, and the Olympic Games. Seeing is knowing, and is still a basic idea in our culture. This is true even more so with YouTube and the video world we inhabit. There's nothing wrong with beauty in the world. But Judaism offered a slightly different approach, maybe even radically different. In the Torah, God communicates, but we cannot see the divine. Instead, at Mount Sinai, the book of Deuteronomy states, you heard the sounds of words, but saw no image. There was only a voice. 92 times that idea of listening is emphasized in the last book of the Torah. There's something incredibly powerful about listening to someone else. This concept is then picked up in Rabbinic Judaism, which made the Shema, the central pillar of Judaism, listen, deeply hear, and internalize the concept of the oneness of God and the universe. This is something we recite over and over again. When the rabbis of the Talmud wanted to introduce a new idea, their opening is Tashma. Come and listen. Come and take in these words, these ideas. In fact, the basic methodology of Torah study is chavruta, where two people come together to study Torah. They read the text aloud, hearing it and each other, listening deeply. This also gets picked up in the Shiva home, when we are asked to listen intently to the mourner. Perhaps the entire conflict with Korah was caused by not hearing his pain, by not hearing the complaints. It was a failure of empathy. We live in a world where we do not always take the time to really hear others, and that often leaves us without the ability to hear perspectives from our own, which are different. And we can miss the shadows which reveal the truth. We must always try to remember that deep listening, asking questions, and responding with compassion can transform the world. It may, in fact, prevent us from getting swallowed up by our conflicts, bringing more peace to us all. Shabbat Shalom.